What were you doing, Ebraheem?
I was 17 years old. Company was like, this kid destroyed our entire infrastructure of our company in the entire state of Florida.
What? Hang on, we need some context.
I had no lawyer, I had no family next to me. It was just me getting into federal court because of a patent infringement.
You create something as an artist. The moment you want to monetize the same, you want law to come into the picture.
When is it a copy and when is it inspired?
When you're copying, you're copying. If the consumer is not able to differentiate the goods and services of one brand from the other, there is a violation.
You have influencers promoting dupe. For the big brands, it's everything. Protecting their designs, protecting their logos, protecting their brand image.
What would you do?
So we took him to court. You think you're the best lawyer in the UAE? Well, you haven't met Ebraheem yet. Get in your place. And they did not know how to answer. They literally did not reply back.
Law is here to protect you.
I remember one of my customers, he copied me, exact copy of Trevor Rose. The nerve that he actually invites me to the opening.
Welcome to Beyond the Surface, brought to you by Design Studio by Huzaifa. I'm Helen Farmer, thrilled to guide you through the nuanced world of design, art and intellectual property protection. Today we're joined by three exceptional individuals who navigate these realms through their creative and legal expertise. We're going to explore how intellectual property rights play a crucial role in protecting creativity and fostering innovation in design. So who is around the table for today's episode? I'm really honoured to welcome Ebraheem Al Samadi, who is the star of Dubai Bling, the innovative mind behind Forever Rose Cafe, and his knack for transforming global concepts into unique business ventures right here set new trends in the UAE's luxury and culinary scenes. We're also joined to add some legal expertise. Chandni Malhotra is a distinguished lawyer and the CEO of Malhotra Legal Consultancy. With over a decade of experience in law, she's a beacon of knowledge on legal matters here in the region, specialising in intellectual property and corporate law. So she'll be sharing some valuable legal insights, as she does on her platform at Dubai Factology, going viral in the UAE. And finally joined by Louise Nichol, an esteemed figure in the fashion world. She is known for her leadership as the former editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar Arabia. And her profound insights into media and content creation, Louise has been instrumental in shaping the narrative of fashion journalism here in the Middle East. And that expansive experience ensures that originality and innovation continue to thrive in the competitive world of fashion. So she's here as a vanguard of both style and substance. Thrilled to have all of you here. Thank you so, so much for your time. I'm so honoured to have all of you around the table for your various insights and lens that you live and work through here in the UAE. And because we are talking about intellectual property today, I think we need to get on the same page with some of these terms. So Chandni, if it's okay with you, would you mind giving us a little bit of a bottom line on what intellectual property actually is and what it means to you as a lawyer?
Usually when we talk about property, we talk about something which is tangible, something that you can buy or sell. But then there is another regime of property that you cannot see. In most of the cases, though, there is something that you can see and it is still intellectual property, like your design. So this is all intellectual property. In all original sense, if you have to see what is intellectual property, anything that your mind creates, whether it's a movie, a beautiful song, the shape of a perfume bottle for that matter, all these things come within the domain of intellectual property rights. Legally speaking, there is a particular framework about intellectual property. So you create something as an artist, you're good with it. The moment you want to monetize the same, you want law to come into the picture. And that is where it becomes a right. So generally speaking, it is all about your creativity that stays with you. You produce something you enjoy. The moment you monetize it in terms of, say, your composition, your music, your book, it becomes an intellectual property.
I think there are quite a lot of myths and misconceptions and misunderstandings around this, and we're going to be picking through some examples that you've worked on and certainly what's come to the fore with our guests today. Louise, in your experiences as a journalist and an editor, what kind of brushes with intellectual property have you had over the years?
So for the fashion industry, which is where I spent most of my career as editor-in-chief, intellectual property is obviously everything. If you are designing handbags, if you are designing clothing, shoes, and that goes through to furniture, then your ownership of that design is really key to being able to monetize it and to protect your brand.
And to promote the brand as well.
And to promote the brand, indeed, because when you do have cheap copies of things, obviously it devalues your brand, not only your own sales, it actually affects how much you can charge for your product when there's a proliferation of fakes out there. You know, for the big brands, it's everything: protecting their designs, protecting their logos, protecting their brand image.
And then in terms of content in the magazines, we can delve into that a little bit later, but obviously words, but photos and how social media's had an impact is absolutely enormous.
It's a huge minefield, because when I was working in print journalism, every photograph has a copyright ownership, generally held by the photographer. So the magazine or the publisher pays a license to use that photograph. And that is still the law today. It still exists. But when the internet comes into it and social media comes into it, it's very hard. As a magazine, you cannot print a photograph unless you have paid for the license to use the copyright on it. But when you are a magazine with an Instagram page, when you are an individual with an Instagram page, it becomes very hard. I'm sure I'm guilty of this as well. We're not all going to Getty and paying for the copyright every time we repost an image of, for example, Taylor Swift, my favorite artist. Sorry, Taylor. Sorry, Getty. So it has proliferated so far. It's very hard to keep a control of the copyright. And what that does, I think, is it changes mindset. And when you start with those small things, then people don't care. You know, it's such a proliferation. And I think that's why we maybe lose sight of copywriting and trademarking, and it cycles itself.
Also in Netflix, I remember whenever we would do like any filming, especially like it's in my house or my cafe, if there's any artwork that's behind us, we would have to sign that we give the rights to Netflix to use it in any way they want.
And in theory, the artist should probably
be involved in that conversation as well.
We would use a photograph in a magazine with an artwork in the background. You would at the very least have to credit the artist and probably really have permission from them, and potentially even pay a fee. They could come back to you on that.
Ebraheem, when you were starting out your entrepreneurial journey, what were your understandings of intellectual property? And was it something that you were aware of from the beginning when you started Conceptualize and Trendspot globally? Or was it very much an afterthought?
So this is quite funny because this is the beginning of my business, was actually getting into federal court because of a patent infringement. I was 17 years old. I had no lawyer. I had no family next to me. It was just me. The judge was like telling the company, like, what are you doing to him? And the company was like, this kid destroyed our entire infrastructure of our company in the entire state of Florida.
What? Hang on, we need some context. What was the business idea and what were you doing, Ebraheem?
Yeah. There was this famous shoe called Heelys. It was basically a shoe with a wheel inside. So Heelys claimed that they owned the concept of heeling, which is to skate like on your heel. Like that's why it's called heeling. And what happened was when I was 17, so my father had a business in the mall that we used to operate and we used to go to. And our neighbor was a shop who sold those Heelys. The manager came to us and said, listen, we cannot keep these shoes in stock. It's crazy. And you know, me as a businessman, I'm like, okay, supply and demand, how can I get these shoes? I contacted Heelys and they laughed at me. You're 17 years old. Like, what do you expect for us to sell to you? Like, what are you going to do with it? And I was like, I can handle it. Like, I can do the business. They're like, no, you know, you're too young or whatever. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. So I went to LA by myself without telling my parents or anything. I'm in LA's downtown district because I went online. I decided to say, like, where do we find wholesalers? And there was like this article about the downtown district in LA. That's where like Forever 21 started their company, and all these companies started in that district. It's basically factories that are coming because it's closer to China. So the port in LA is a lot bigger than other ports around the US. And I remember walking around LA for 4 hours, just trying to find someone who sold these shoes. In 4 hours, my only lead was a kid playing with the shoes. I was like, listen, I'll give you $20 if you take me to that place, because that's my only lead, so I can't lose that lead. He took me to the place, and I went to the shop, and I was like, I want to buy these shoes. He's like, how many you want to buy? I'm like, all of them. He's like, we have a lot. I'm like, what's a lot? He's like, 3 containers. I'm 17 years old. I just had my money that I saved from my small business on eBay and everything. The shoes that I bought were actually called wheelies. They were inspired by Heelys, okay? However, they had their own mechanism, which was better than Heelys. So Heelys, you would have to take out the wheel, and that one has a push button.
And it was built into the shoe.
It was built into the shoe, and you push the button, you push it out. So my selling aspect was like, Heelys was trying to get the customer, to cheat the customer by taking the wheel out, and then the child losing the wheel, then having to come back to buy the wheel again. So they would get money on buying more wheels, and then the wheelies, you don't have to do that. It was a better version. And he's like, we have the supply upstairs. So I went upstairs. I will never forget the lady. She was an Egyptian lady. So she was Arab also. And she was like, why do you want these shoes? No one's buying them.
Oh, that's interesting. So there's a geographical difference in the
Well,
popularity.
in the US, what I've learned is that trends start on one state, then they spread. It spreads through schools. So in each district, we have, like, for example, counties. So we have counties, we have cities, and we have states. So from the county, you probably have, like, let's say 100 schools. So when those schools start, all the kids start talking about it because remember that time there was no social media. So this is before people can afford, like Heelys couldn't afford commercials. Commercials were only handled by the mainstream companies, like, the big corporations, US corporations. So you cannot afford that. So the only way for you to grow is through schools. So Hollister and Abercrombie and Fitch grew through schools. They would take the popular kids from the high schools that had like nice bodies. They'll put them in store with their shirts off that will attract the girls. So it was a crazy thing how marketing was done before.
And then it was, I remember this in the UK with other brands, but it was like the status symbol to be holding the shopping bag. And you keep the shopping bag for months and months.
Those were the golden days when we'd go to the mall in the 90s as teenagers and we'd go sample the food in the food courts. And it was a whole different thing. And honestly, I don't like this whole online buying thing. I want to go back to the mall. I want to enjoy, I want to try things on. I want to see people's reaction when I'm wearing it. I want people's feedback. I can't do this online thing. It's just not me. So I took all 3 containers. It was about $7 for each pair of shoes. And they were selling at $90. Okay, so imagine the profits. And it was like on everyone's Christmas list. I literally took with my suitcases, like I took some with me and the rest I shipped them. I got back to Florida and immediately from the airport, I went to the kiosk that I negotiated to have in the mall. And that was another battle too, because with the kiosk, I went to the landlord and I told the landlord, I want this location.
Did they say you're not 18?
Yeah, well, I was like, I have a company though. Like it's my mom's company. I use my mom for everything. Like I used her ID, I used everything. And I was like, my mom didn't even know she had owned a company. And I was like, doing everything. I'm gonna give to her, like, mom sign this, mom sign this, mom. She will sign it. She's like, are you doing something wrong? I'm like, no. She's like, I trust you. She'll sign it, So the mall was smart. The mall was like, okay, here's this kid. He has money to pay for the rent. I don't care. Let's rent it. So they're like, if you're gonna take this location, you have to take 9 other locations. And I was like, wait, how can I afford 9 locations? I'm like, I can do it. So I was calculating in my head how many shoes I can sell per day, how I'm gonna do it. So I said, I'll open 1 location every month. So we agreed. So each location will open another location. I start calling my friends. I'm like, listen, how much you getting salary? They're like, I'm getting $8 an hour. I'm like, I'll give you 10. Come work for me. So I hired all my friends, okay? I opened throughout from Orlando, Florida, all the way to Miami on the turnpike, which is like, let's say Sheikh Zayed Road, So it would cover the whole state. And I opened these kiosks in all the malls. Every month was another one. And I would go in the morning. I would deliver the goods and I would pick up the money on the way back.
Were you still at school at this point as well?
No,
Were you studying?
I left high school when I was 15, and I started doing my online school so I can work more. And then I sent a letter to the senator of Florida to bypass my child labor law so that way I can work more hours. And they approved it because I was the only one with my mom. And I got my high school diploma at the age of 16. So the core was like Wheelys had their own patent and Heelys had their own patent. However, there was 2 different manufacturer patents because they're both built differently. Heely said, no, there is something called healing and we own the right of healing. But it's not our decision what the child does with the shoe. So you want to sue the children, he's healing. It was still a case. We went through, so the judge said, okay, go through a thing called discovery, which is we had to sit with the team and had to answer all these questions. And they were suing me and my father. I'm like, what did my father have to do with this? Because that was the address of where the shoes were shipped. And they did not believe that I did this on myself. So they were trying to sue me for, I don't know, like $2 million. They end up settling out of court for $800.
Oh, really?
They're like, just stop selling.
Now, this raises a few interesting questions about terminology, because you've said patent there. We've talked about copyright and there's trademark. And I don't understand the difference or distinction between them. So can you explain a little bit, Chandni, about some of these terms?
I love this topic. Like, this is my topic that I want to teach everyone about because people don't know.
So there are different types of intellectual property rights, and most people are confused amongst different terms. So we'll start with the most basic one, which is copyright. In fact, UAE first legislated on copyright when you talk about different intellectual property rights. So copyright is basically a right that you claim over the literary or artistic work. For example, you writing a book, you writing a note, or you're writing a script for the movie, or for this podcast for that matter, a song. These are all the matters of copyright, where your art is involved, some literature is involved. Copyright is usually automatically created the moment you create that work. So even if I do not go to the registrar and ask for the registration, the moment I write a book, I have a copyright over it.
This is good because I have written a book. And in the front, there's some words and dates. And I assume I'm protected. Am I protected?
People can scan it even after you get it copyrighted. For example, when we study in university, we usually issue a book from the library, we get certain pages photocopied, even though that book is already copyrighted. You cannot say that once you get the copyright registration, your work is automatically protected. Legally speaking, that is why we have cases. That is why we go to the court. Generally speaking, copyright is automatically created the moment your work is created. But still, the law gives us this option to go to the registrar and get it protected. Now, why I should get it protected when it is automatically created? Because tomorrow, if somebody uses my work, and if my work is registered, then the court will, of course, give me priority over the other party.
Is it an expensive process?
Not at all. But understand, the moment you get your copyright registered, you're protected for the lifetime. And in the UAE, even after 50 years of your death. So once you are dead, even after 50 years, your family, your legal heirs can encash upon your work.
And what about TM, that trademark?
Okay, so this is
symbol?
copyright, not trademark. Trademark is a mark or a brand name that you use in your course of trade that distinguishes your goods or services from that of the other. The other party could be dealing with the same goods or similar nature of goods, or maybe they're producing something very different altogether. I'm a manufacturer of car. I have a particular trade name. Now, the other person is using the same trade name, but they're producing, say, mobile phones. This is still an infringement of trademark. So a mark that you use that distinguishes your goods and services from that of the other.
I can see Ebraheem's brain working here.
A lot of people don't understand one thing is that the trademark, there's different categories.
Absolutely.
So you have to register the trademark in every category if you want to protect yourself correctly. So if you're, for example, we're Forever Rose, we're registered under flowers. We're also registered under fragrance. We're also registered under the cafe. So each trademark has to be registered under the proper category based on what you're using it for. And you cannot take that name and claim that you own everything. You can fight it in court and say, no, that's very close to my name, or that's infringing, or that's confusing. And these cases, if you look online, it's been so much like, for example, we know the story about Sony Ericsson and Sony. Confusing, right? So you think they're similar, but they're not. You would understand so much more about trademark and how complex it could be. And you can own the trademark as a name, and you can also own the trademark as the logo.
Have you had any run-ins with competitors who maybe are overly inspired by Forever Rose?
Oh my God. So after leaving the US court, federal court, and winning that, I was encountered in the UAE. A friend of mine was trying to take my company because he knew inside information how I built it. I went through the judicial system in the UAE, which I have absolute respect for. As a foreigner coming into this country, I was afraid because I was like, the land is for its people. But in the UAE, that's not just for its people. The law is one, and no one is above the law, regardless of who you are.
And I also think there's a huge amount of support for entrepreneurs.
100%. And I think the success of Dubai, the UAE in general, is because of its laws and its very strict infrastructure of its laws and how they protect. And I'm surprised about the UAE having so much respect for intellectual property right more than any other country in our region. And this is what I love about it. So I was in there and I took all my rights, even though it felt at one point that I was going to lose it, because of the extent of the process that I had to go through. But this is just like any other country. So I had that issue, and we have issues every once in a while because of our success in the region. I think initially when we first started, there was about 3,000 people internationally copying our design, the rose in the glass. And it was because of its trend online. A lot of people said, well, you know what? It's just a flower. We can copy it,
Not really understanding the complexity and the...
Yeah, and for me, like, I would choose the people I would want to take to court. It would cost about 100,000 dirhams to take someone to court for copyright.
So it's got to be worth it.
It could be if the company had funds. So, for example, if you're going to sue, and the lawyer can correct me on this, if you're going to take someone to court, you'd have to make sure that they have the money to pay for your legal fees and for your damages. Because if they go bankrupt, you can't get your money out of it.
It's really hard, though, and I think about where ideas originate from, though, because they're, we talk all the time, imitation is the highest form of flattery. Where do you get ideas? I've spoken to comedians who think they've invented a joke, but actually they've seen a stand-up and it's stayed in their head, and 20 years later they're like, oh gosh, I didn't actually invent that joke. And we see this actually in fashion quite a lot, where this was on the runway just this season, but actually let's look back into the archives of Versace from 20 years ago, and this is a completely unoriginal idea. And I guess that kind of trends as well, that we've got quite a short memory. When we think about fashion, there is an idea of paying homage to a designer or a trend or a colorway or a design. How can designers really be unique? And that relates to furniture as well as fashion.
It's very hard for designers. Recently, there's a sportswear brand in the US called Popflex, and her designs have been worn. I'm going to bring her in again by Taylor Swift. And as soon as Taylor wore this little, and it's like a little gym skirt, quite chuly and flouncy, it went wild on Instagram, as you can imagine. So there's obviously a big Chinese clothing manufacturer that starts with the female pronoun and ends with the opposite of out, immediately come up with their version of it. And I have to say, great credit to the girl who designed it. She actually took and patented the design, would it be?
Yes.
So she now patents her act. And she said, it's a small company, 20 people, but suddenly you've got a huge Chinese manufacturer sending out your work. But she has now patented them and they've stopped. And it was this, she had a meeting with the owner of the company and now she fights for those. So you can protect your designs when you have something very original, very unique. But unfortunately, you do have on social media this dupe culture. So you have influencers promoting dupe.
Yeah, can't afford X, buy Y.
Yeah, and I think that's where it's very hard and where we as journalists would really focus on trying to educate a consumer in why you should support the original, why you should buy into that. And I think with luxury goods in particular, that plays a really, really important role with furniture, with luxury brands, the materials, the artisanship, the heritage, the DNA. It's on a different scale. You can't dupe a beautiful, beautiful table like this.
As he mentioned, when he got his trademark registered, he did it under various classes. So that is a different type of trademark called a composite trademark. So I can just have a name as a trademark with no special design, no logo. That is a simple trademark. But if I want my trademark to look a particular way with a particular color combination, a pattern, maybe a tag line along with, in that case, it's called a composite trademark. Now, since there are different elements involved, so I have to get all those elements registered under different categories. That's why we have class A, class B, class C. And if I'm infringing, say, one particular element, then the opposite person, then they cannot file a case against me for the entire trademark. They can only go against me for that particular category. Now, this is trademark. Another one is, say, trade secret. A lot of people, they do not know about this type of intellectual property. For example, say Coke, Pepsi, we all drink it. We all know the basic ingredients that are used, but we do not know how it is manufactured. Why? Because Coke has already got the trade secrets registered as trademark.
When is my question? So let's say I design a chair and it's for my own home and I decide to go to Huzaifa and we're going to create it for my home with a design studio. We're going to make 8 of them. At what point do you decide to get that copyrighted, to get that protected? If it's going to be profitable, do you do it to protect yourself from the outset? When would you do that?
I mean, as a businessman, initially, second you would check with legal, but as a businessman, you have to see if you have the money or you have the funds to scale that business. So if it's just, for example, you just made an idea of a chair and you don't have money to manufacture it, you don't have money to copyright it, you don't have any of the fund or any of the will to do that, then it's not necessary. However, if you believe in that your design is unique and you do see that you're going to actually make more chairs.
There could be an appetite for that.
Exactly, and that's what you want to go into. Then obviously in that point, then you will go into the legal and you get the legal advice of how to structure the trade name and the copyright and all this.
I look at it differently. Being a legal person as well as an entrepreneur, my trade name could look very simple. It may not be aesthetic at all. I know that nobody would want to copy it, but I know that I can make my brand really big, that somebody at some point in time would want to use it. So I play safe beforehand. I would get it registered and then would start my business.
And to come back to this idea of taking inspiration from something. So let's say I go to Morocco and I see a beautiful rug and I live in regret of never buying it. And I come back and I decide I'm going to basically copy it. How many changes would you need to make feasibly and I decide that actually a lot of people want this rug. I reckon I've tapped into something here. I'm not going to ship them from Morocco. I'm going to get them made here. When is it a copy and when is it inspired? How many changes do you think, I've heard it apparently in design and furniture, it's 17 changes. So to use this chair as an example, we would need to change the color. We would need to change maybe the stitching goes from horizontal to quilted and we do a different material for legs. So apparently 17 changes for tables and chairs. But is that industry specific?
First of all, there is no such parameter, though there is no minimum or maximum number of changes that you might want to incorporate. See, when you're copying. The test is very simple. Is there any likelihood of confusion? If I, as a consumer, if I'm not able to differentiate the goods and services of one brand from the other, it means there is a violation. Also, when we talk about intellectual property rights, it's always a matter of jurisdiction. So if I get my mark registered in the UAE, I cannot claim protection in Morocco. So in that case, I have to go an extra mile and I have to get my mark registered there as well. Like I have a lot of clients in the UAE who are also exporting their goods and services to other countries. So I always tell them, go and get it registered there as well. Just registration certificate from the UAE authorities will not give you protection in any other country.
That's interesting. So using the flowers in that glass, that beautiful structure, Ebraheem, do you notice if you were to go to a mall in another emirate or you see something on Instagram, you can obviously pick out the difference, but do you think that it can be close enough to confuse consumers?
So what's funny is that we're the first company in the entire Middle East to actually trademark, copyright, and patent anything from a flower shop. So when we initially started the business, we wanted to scale up. We wanted to do something that was not done in the region. When we had this issue, we had a conflict with my friend that was trying to take my company. He was producing fake products from Forever Rose. So we manufacture these Forever Roses in Jebel Ali. He was manufacturing in Abu Dhabi using our fake plaques, using our technique, but it was a copy. So if it's being sold somewhere, so you go through the proper channels and they go with the police, they go to the unit and they take a raid. So initially, before you do the raid, the lawyer has to go and purchase one of the products, take the original and take the fake to the laboratory, and they have to see how is the difference or how can a consumer be confused about the product. So when we sent our flower to the laboratory to go through the inspection, they called me and they said, this is how professional the UAE is, right? They asked me, can we keep it here, the flower? And I was like, why? I was going to give it to them, obviously, because he said, this is the first time we had a flower.
Because why would you? But, in terms of a perishable good before, and now it's a completely different...
Exactly. So they're used to having Chanel and Hermes bags, and then now they have these flowers. They were so confused. Like, how can someone protect their copyright and their brand with a flower? So they kept it there, and then they did the raid, and then they asked me, when they took all the products, they're like, do you want them? I'm like, obviously not. Just dispose of them because they're not originals, So it was crazy how we were the first to do that. And then we start seeing these locations pop up everywhere with fakes. And it's funny thing is, my mom works as my lawyer, I get messages all the time. She's like, this location is selling your products. And she goes to this place in Ras Al Khaimah, into the mall. And she goes to them and she asks the kiosk, she's like, is this Forever Rose? Because it looks like our roses.
What about the branding?
The branding is something completely different.
Something kind of generic, but...
Yeah, but the design of the kiosk, the color of the palette, but you can tell it's a fake if you look very closely. It's not our aesthetic. And they told her, yeah, it's the same location as the one in Dubai Mall, which is my location. And then my mom, she was like, who's the owner? He's like, Ebraheem, the blooming man. She's like, that's my son. And he doesn't have any shops here in Ras Al Khaimah. You guys are copying him and you cannot do this. She wanted to record him. Like, Mom, you cannot record anyone in the UAE. Just leave it alone. Just chill.
Karma will come for him, or maybe the courts.
I mean, I can easily send a letter to the mall saying that they must remove him. But then again, it's just it's such a headache. I said, you know what? Instead of me focusing on these people, let me just focus on making my brand more complex. So what we did is we just recently signed a franchising deal internationally.
Congratulations.
So thank you so much. So when I announced just on my social media, we didn't do any PR releases. And we had more than 3,000 requests for the cafe. It's crazy. So we signed the US, Canada, Turkey, Saudi Arabia. We have so many people that are now interested in Forever Rose. I think it was 129 countries. And we're just going through and making sure that the people that we're going to be working with have the experience. So in the next year, you would see Forever Rose pop up all over the world. This is my dream. And I'll tell you another funny story. So our concept, who made us famous, is the Bella Rose. Bella, which means beautiful in Italian, was actually my sister's idea. So when I had the Eternal Roses, which is the Forever Roses, in my office many years ago, and it was just there because I always go to trade shows all over the world to learn about new products. So this was something that arrived on my desk, and I told my sister saw it, she's like, why don't you make the Beauty and the Beast rose? So that was the idea. So I started it from there, right? So when we started, there was one other company, I'm not going to mention its name because it's no longer existing in the UAE because of our strength. So that company, when they saw us making this product, they started to copy us. So that was my direct competitor. because the owner of that company was always throwing shade at me on social media. And I was like, you know what? I never threw shade back. I'm going to go through the legal process. So we took him to court. He has one of the strongest lawyers in the UAE. And my lawyer was good.
Not your mom this
Not
time.
my mom, no. So my lawyer was good, but I have a relationship with my lawyers. We understand each other. We work as a family. So we sent them the cease and desist letter to stop operation with our product. And their legal team replied back saying that your design is not original at all, and it actually is taken from the movie Disney Beauty and the Beast. Okay, you want to be smart? You think you're the best lawyer in the UAE? Well, you haven't met Ebraheem yet. So I went and I approached Disney, and I told Disney I want to have the exclusivity to having the rose. So we have the approval from Disney. We did the official Disney Beauty and the Beast rose. We paid Disney a heavy amount of money for it as well. And then we sent them the email from Disney saying, we are Disney. Get in your place. And they did not know how to answer. They literally did not reply back. We go back to the link and they completely removed all the products. 9 months later, they removed the trade name. They changed the trade name because they were afraid of being furtherly prosecuted. And we took our design and we had this strength. But it just goes to show you, sometimes you have to be very smart to know how do you associate yourself and who do you associate yourself with in order to put people in their place.
I'm glad you mentioned trade shows there, because that's a big part of how a lot of business is done here in the region. We have enormous food and travel trade, and I think for a lot of people it can be their first foray into testing the market. And I have friends and associates who have gone to trade fairs with an idea, with a product, only for someone to be inspired by what they have seen as they've walked around or picked up a product or had a conversation. Should you be protected before you set up shop and you get your kiosk? Presumably, in an ideal world, yes. But when you're small, that must feel like a big cost to outlay.
See, you always begin when you're small. So there always has to be a start. It's all about how big of an entrepreneur you see yourself after a few years, and then you take measures accordingly. Trade fair, generally speaking, there are some people who are at the very beginning of their career. So they just want to showcase their work, see what is the response of the people, and then probably after 2-3 years, they want to start their business. In those cases, you can be liberal, just be a little laid back. But if you're ready to make your mark and just you want to start the business, it's better, if not, say, trademark or copyright, whichever intellectual property is applicable, at least go for one registration. Like in his case, he mentioned he's got the patent, he's got the copyright and trademark. Trademark is comparatively cheaper. Right? So why not you go for it? At least protect yourself for 10 years. And also, since you use this word generic, I wanted to talk about it. So whenever we go for the trademark application, a lot of applications get rejected. Like in the UAE, when you want to start your business, the first thing that any company would do is they take approval for you. Right? And what is that approval? Basically, they check that whether the trademark you're requesting is available or not. So a lot of people, they use generic names, and hence the rejection. For example, if I want to do, say, Apple business, I want to import and export Apple, I cannot use the term Apple because it's generic. But I can use generic terms for the businesses which are not related to Apple. Hence, Apple used for electronics.
That's why you see a lot of brands now, they're using they're mixing numbers with letters. Yeah. I remember a few days ago, I had a customer came in to me, he's like, oh, I own Forever Rose in his country. And I was like, pardon, excuse me? Last I checked, I was the owner. And he tells me, no, I own it, I copyrighted it. And I tried to tell him, like, just because you're operating under that name doesn't mean you own the trademark. I just have not seen you yet. So what people do here, the biggest mistake, and I believe you can agree with this, whenever someone wants to do a business, they go to the DED and they say that they want this name. They think they're trademarking the name by going to the DED. No, you need to go make sure the trademark's available. If the trademark's available, you take that name, then you go to the DED. So for example, one of my companies is called House of Luxury. House of Luxury owns the IP rights of Forever Rose. But here what they do is they will go into the DED, because that's how they open a company, and they will take a name and they think that protects them. It does not protect you. In fact, you can go to the DED and you can, let's say there's a company in Australia called XYZ Sofas, that's in Australia, then you come to DED and you say, I want XYZ Sofas, and DED says, okay, take XYZ Sofas. XYZ Sofas comes in and they say, nope, you have to change your name because that's my trademark. But the DED is not connected to the trademark.
This is very useful information.
This is like probably the most useful information for beginners.
And also in most of the cases, you may not want your business name to be the same as your trademark.
So for example, there's some companies where I have to send a third party to approach them, like a PR agency. Because when they know it's me, they're like, he's Bling from Dubai Bling, he has money. The most thing I hate, like I love being on Dubai Bling, but the most thing I hate is people always assuming that I'm ready to pay top dollar for everything. The rich don't get rich by spending their money. And plus, I'm enjoying free stuff now. Like, I wouldn't mind getting some free stuff from Huzaifa Furniture. But
Let's manifest that.
so I'm going to work on it.
Well, this is the thing, to come back to Louise's point about luxury and perception, and effectively two different audiences. You know, if you're going to get someone who's going to buy a Cartier watch and then you're going to go to someone who's going to buy a copy, the person who's buying the copy probably wouldn't be buying the Cartier watch to begin with for budgetary reasons. They might have the aspirations of a similar look, but
It's not your customer. Yeah.
it's not your customer. But
They might become your customer. And that's why it's very important for brands to, otherwise they wouldn't care, right? They'd let it go. But it is very important because that could potentially be your customer. And also maybe you're gifted a fake Cartier watch and it breaks after 2 weeks and you're not aware that it's fake. And definitely these brands have had examples, I know, of customers coming in and saying, my product's broken. Who gave it to you, madam? My husband. Have a word with your husband.
you might want to see the certificate, my friend.
It's not as simple as that's not my customer, that's a different market. The brands spend so much on marketing, on advertising, on building these brands and these trademarks, often over hundreds and hundreds of years.
Well, absolutely
Family
right.
businesses,
You know,
that's what they own. They own the brand,
The
as much
reputation.
as the designs, and that comes from the quality, the heritage, the craftsmanship. So
And
they-
Huzaifa being a really good example of that in terms of being a legacy brand here in the region for nearly 50 years. And I'm not speaking out of turn, but, you know, obviously there are companies who've been inspired by them, both in terms of the product, but also doing direct rip-offs of photography and marketing and doing that in other parts of the world because, as you said earlier, social media makes it so easy to screenshot something, crop out a watermark, and, you know, I'm going to pass this off as my own, which is really frustrating for so many brands. You know, what would you do if someone was to come to you and say, well, let's collaborate, let's do a version of Forever Rose, let's do a cafe together because I'm actually already doing it without you.
I remember one of my customers that used to come to us all the time, him and his wife, we would come every day. Suddenly, after a few months, he copied me in Sharjah, opened a exact copy of Forever Rose. Even though he didn't use any of my trademark names or anything like that, or signature items. What boggled my mind is that he put, because in all Forever Rose cafes, we have a Forever Rose as in the center of the table because that's our beginning. And that's the only thing that's colored from all the interior, which is the red rose. He put a red rose, but he had the nerve to use a fake one. That's what bothered me the most.
At least give me some business.
Because I'm not gonna lie, I was inspired by Fendi's black and white pop-up cafe in London that was only there for a temporary thought of being black and white. I did not take any element from that design. Nothing besides the two colors, which is very common. It's not like I was copying Tiffany's blue.
No, and what you've done actually is putting a UA twist on some of the designs.
Yeah, so their Fendi's idea was very sketchy, like a sketch. Ours was bringing out the palace elements, the luxury, this and that. It was completely different. Every single element of Forever Rose Cafe is designed in-house. So every drawing, every line is by an in-house artist that we paid to get this all done. So when they copied us in Sharjah, this guy, and had the nerve to use a fake rose, I mean, if he would have bought my rose to put on his table, I would have given him some appreciation. The nerve that he actually invites me to the opening. Wow. Expecting me, I'm gonna come promote it. So I was just like, you know what? I told him, God bless you. I'm not gonna just, I'm gonna leave you to it. 6 months later, he wants to sell the business to me. I laughed inside so hard that I teared from laughing. Like, it was just like, are you serious? The nerve, you're gonna copy me and then failed and ask me to bail you out. So he wasn't able to sell it. It was shut down within 6 months. Another pop-up happened to us almost right after we opened because they came during our construction phase. And that lady, she had a cafe already and she switched it to the black and white.
Well, that's a really interesting point, actually, because obviously Huzaifa is doing a lot with homes, but also restaurants and Michelin-starred restaurants. So there are a lot of NDAs and very closely guarded imagery. And to avoid exactly that, someone coming in at a late stage and going, actually, that's a rather nice idea. I think we'll take that for ourselves.
So we have two actual official copies, like from everything, even our drawings. So we have like a drawing of Mona Lisa that we did in our version. We have different drawings that we completely reconstructed the drawing into our version. All my customers send me pictures and saying, ha ha ha, look what they did. If you're going to copy from A to Z, you're always going to be known as a copy. And you do not have the know-how or the idea of where do you foresee that future of the company. So for example, what is my idea? Nobody knows what's the next step for Forever Rose Cafe. This was the plan from day one. I knew exactly my timeline on when I'm going to start changing things. You coming in as a copy, you only know what's then and there. But you know what? You came in too late because You're coming in as a copy. People are going to go there and say, where's Forever Rose? Where's Ebraheem? Where's the connection?
People want that authenticity, they want that connection, they want that brand story, they want that legacy, which is why it's short-lived, which is why it's short-sighted, which is why 6 months later your phone was ringing.
I think that's where you flip it back to the consumer, and whereas the journalist, that's who you're talking to rather than the business side of things. And you're saying, do you want to be the consumer of the fake handbag, of the copied table, of the fake rose? Is that who you want to be? And, you know, we would always say, just buy the best that you can afford that's genuinely made in that category. It doesn't need to be a Cartier watch, but buy a really good swatch, you know? It doesn't have, you don't want to be that fake person.
Sometimes some copies are actually better quality than the original, believe it or not. So if you don't really care, you care about like actually, like let's say if it's a pants and you got a copy than the original, and the price is like 10% is the fake and 100% is the original, and you're okay with it, that's fine. But if it's makes more sense to buy the original and will last you longer, then buy the original.
You are right, and a lot of the luxury handbags are facing this at the moment. Bad
big
brands,
time, because the
quality issue is coming out. They're starting to manufacture in China rather than in Italy, and that is where it comes back to being on the brand. And aside from the legal, it becomes back to the creative process. If you are going to charge X for your product, from a table to a handbag, you do have to offer value for money, because the rich don't get rich by spending unnecessarily, right? So you do have to make sure that that value for money is there. There is an onus on the brands. You have to keep innovating. You have to keep finding interesting ways around the social media proliferation, whether that's doing collaborations, always driving your business forward like Ebraheem is. Like your copies don't know where you're going.
Yeah, our copies of the flowers, the difference between ours and theirs is that we actually have the best manufacturing of the roses itself. There's a technique and the technology behind the preservation process.
Don't give it away,
Yeah.
your
So-
trade secrets.
Yeah, so theirs, the rose does not last as long.
It's not forever.
It's not forever. It literally it crumbles faster because everyone knows that what we put onto the rose, but no one knows the technique. And that's where you become special, and knowing the technique of how it's done. And for us, it's 90% technique and it's 10% product. So for them, they might buy the rose, it will stay for a few months, and they always tell me like, oh, we bought your roses and it doesn't last. I'm like, can I see a picture, please? It's not our rose. It's a fake.
I want to come back to this idea of originality, because I feel like we'd be amiss to not talk about AI and where that's going in terms of creativity and getting ideas and getting content and photography and, you know, eventually product, I'm sure. What are you anticipating in that space, Chandni? What are you thinking about how people can be protecting themselves from someone, I don't know, using your voice or using your image?
I had a question on my mind for you. It's regarding this.
Go.
It's been on my brain. So because you're talking before about the book, right?
Right.
So if you use AI to generate something, and someone goes and tries to copyright it as theirs, and then the AI gave the same thing to other people, how does that work?
So of course, you're free to generate any content whatsoever using ChatGPT, any AI platform for that matter. Understand the governments across the world, they're promoting AI. It means they want indirectly the content to be copied. You can say copied or regenerated. Now, if you want to say you want to write a book, you just generate a lot of content and you go for the copyright. First of all, you may not be granted copyright because the plagiarism check will not approve.
So they know it came from AI.
There's a minimum standard, right? So at least 60% of your work has to be original. Like when I give work to my team, I always make sure that I check whether it's original or not. And the minimum limit is 60%.
You're right, but 60%, if it's anything above 60%, it'll be flagged.
I completed my doctorate in law already, and I did it from Delhi University, one of the bestest universities on the planet. The standard is super high. So in my case, for my final thesis to be approved, it had to be 90% original. Otherwise, my mentor would not approve anything of it. So I literally had to go interview the people, go to the Supreme Court, sit, observe, and then write it on my own.
No shortcuts.
Absolutely.
I don't know why there's so many smart people in India. Like, seriously. Like, all the smartest people I know in the world is from India.
I think that's something in the soil, and also because we have had our colonial past. So, we've had that aggression, and it is still with us. Here, I'll tell you something very interesting. The very first patent in India was granted in the year 1857. An engineer, his name was D. Pennis, he had created this pankha pulling machine. Pankha is a fan. Small machine, but he got a patent, and it was given by the British government. The same year in 1857, India had the first formal and official revolt against the British government. Wow. We call it now the First War of Independence. That's the beauty. So I think that is something in the soil. And then we're also aggressive. We want to make our mark.
I've been to India and I absolutely loved it. I've always been attached to the Indian culture and I wanted to invest more in India. I believe it's such a big market and it's up and coming. And I've mentioned it a lot in my social media because they see me there, going there. So it's not like nothing new. It's one of the most successful nationalities I see in the world were actually from India. So all the tech, everything, it's all Indian. And I think because there's so many Indians in Dubai, we kind of forget that and that our society was built on amazing Indian lawyers and Indian doctors, and we lose the appreciation sometimes not to recognize that.
Families coming here to set up in the 60s, 70s, 80s and having that entrepreneurial spirit. And that's why I'm so grateful that the UAE, as you said, Ebraheem, is taking this so seriously, because you can only really foster real talent and originality if that's being protected. And I think, have all been amazing examples of that today. Any final words, Chandni, that we haven't covered that you feel like listeners in the UAE and beyond need to know about protecting their unique talents, their ideas, their innovations?
So you do not have to wait to become a business person in order to protect your literary or artistic work. Law across the world is here to protect you. So I think you have to take the first step. Just do a little bit of research. You do not have to hire a lawyer for everything. First of all, understand whether your work deserves a copyright or a trademark certificate or patent or trade secret or otherwise. And then go for it, because you never know when you can become very big. Especially, I'm sitting in Dubai and the city has made billionaires like this. So you never know when you can become too big, and later on, then you go to the court and then you say, no, this mark belongs to me. No. So in that case, you have enough laws. If you can afford a lawyer, please go ahead. Otherwise, do your research and get your things protected. You have rights. Please go and claim them. This is what I would want to say.
If you're operating in Dubai, to trademark in Dubai, also to trademark the city of the country of where you're going to be manufacturing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because if you don't register China and you manufacture in China, you can be stopped from sending your goods abroad.
Thank you so, so much for your time and your insights on this from a variety of perspectives, fashion and content, entrepreneurial, and of course, our legal eagle there, Chandni. Thank you so, so much. Ebraheem, Louise, Chandni, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
This expertise highlights the crucial role of intellectual property in fostering a culture of innovation and respect for originality. So join us next time on Beyond the Surface. Until then, keep pushing the boundaries of design and protecting your unique visions. Thank you.